G'day, it's Kareem here from Doesn't Matter again. Um, it's a subject that gets my goat a fair bit, and probably always will, because I hold public officials and high up official CEOs and CFOs in the private sector to a higher standard, and as we should all hold them to a higher standard. And of late, they've been able to get away with lower and lower standards of honesty and dishonesty and malfeasance, malpractice, even illegal behaviour, and they seem to often skirt it due to their ranks of lawyers and protocols and the unwillingness of many institutions to prosecute them or to pursue them vigorously as the way they would pursue the rest of us for the same kinds of behaviours. And there's been a couple of things that seem to be drawing this trend more strongly in Australia, at least for me, and it's the the government has acknowledged that in South Australia in particular, that finally, after they were forced to acknowledge a paper that came out 7 months ago about combustible cladding, the same cladding that killed people in the Grenfell Tower and of course has caused serious fires overseas and in Australia. And how countless buildings have been permitted to have this cladding under state law, and they concealed this for months and months and months. They've concealed this. That kind of absolute irresponsible policy practice freaks me out. The fact that there were contributions from, pardon me, it was getting a bit dry. There were contributions from multiple papers that contributed to this document for years before, saying that this was an issue. This was going to continue to be an issue. We had the Grenfell Tower last year that identified very clearly that this was an issue. There were other fires to do with this fireproof cladding, this fire-ridden or prone cladding in previous years. And these were in studies submitted to the government over the last 3 years, state government, and yet they did nothing with it. Nothing. Neither the Labor Party nor the Liberal Party spoke up about it. And yet the information was public. When the current government was in opposition, they said nothing effectively about it. Because, unfortunately, far too many political members of multiple parties in this country and in this state are beholden to developers, are beholden to builders, are beholden to rich developers, and they have no desire to lose the donations and the support that they get from these powerful individuals. And as a result, the public are let down over and over again. So, you see something like that in the news, and it strikes you. It strikes me as another case of malfeasance by a government. They're public servants. They're paid to know. They're paid to understand. They're paid to act on the basis of that understanding. Not paid to sit on a document for 7 months and ignore preceding advice and documents they've been given for years. Both sides of politics, not just the government in government, but the opposition as well, and saying nothing about it, doing nothing about it, because they don't want to offend particular key place people in important industries. When do the people come first? When do safety come first? Obviously not with the existing series of SA governments, and that's probably something that needs to be addressed. I see it happening overseas as well, where it's, populism works really well at the moment, populist governments all over the world, but they have a tendency to redirect their supporters to the issues that they want to look at. They never want to look at the environmental degradation, the safety standards they've compromised, the pollution they've caused. No, they don't want to do that. So they redirect people away from it. And we kind of need more people to become aware of the fact that both sides of politics and multiple parties are guilty of cozying up to vested interests, cozying up to their particular chosen patrons. and that money in politics needs to go. The whole idea that you can allow political parties to be given donations, given money by these industries, and you think it's not going to result in corruption, it's just naive beyond belief. Money needs to go to politics completely. They need to be able to maybe only give a tiny percentage, like Norway. I think it is 5%. 95% has got to be publicly raised. Only 5% can come from business and authorised bodies. And I think it's only 5% full stop private donations. The rest has to come from public monies allocated on the basis of their seats and their degree of representation, which makes sense. In line with this, the other thing that I want to look at is Western Sydney's University, being one of several universities now that have been giving advice and funding to Chinese students to bypass the quarantine, all right, which has now finally been extended to Japan, Korea, and one other country, which isn't enough. It needs to be extended to probably at least a dozen countries. But I'm aware of the logistical issues of that, but we need to at least be looking at it, and hopefully they are. But government has been terribly slack in extending the range of the quarantine. They've known for at least 4 days that the quarantine period should go from 14 days to at least 27. That's the minimum. It should be at least 27 days. So it's double what it originally was. So if we can't extend that soon enough, we're already seeing outbreaks in Japan, in Italy and elsewhere, because the quarantine period is probably not long enough, and people are being released into the population who are still sick. And again, it's not the Spanish flu, not yet anyway. It needs probably another mutation or two for that. But it does highlight that should this virus become particularly pernicious, or should it be the herald of a much more virulent flu at some point in the near future, that we will be poorly equipped to stop it and quarantine it and geo-trap it in one location or multiple locations and keep it there, because profit again comes first. The universities have been screaming, understandably, for the lost profit. I mean, up to 60% of their students in some cases are foreign students. And that is a weakness. It's a weakness. The Australian government should be stepping in and going, don't worry about it. We'll cover your costs until those students come. If you lose a semester or even a year, we'll cover the costs. Be damned the surplus. We'll cover the costs and keep the country safe. And the universities don't have to suffer, they don't have to sack people, they don't have to freak out. But no, they haven't done that. The government hasn't done that. It's protecting the Treasury at all costs. The Treasury is there for these reasons. Money in the bank is there for these reasons. Public Treasury is there for these reasons. And the whole idea that we should be protecting the public purse at all costs is insane. It's there to do precisely this in an emergency of this nature. So the government hasn't stepped up and protected the universities, so they're not compelled to strive in the market via illegal means, which is what they've done, which is what at least one or two universities have done, and almost certainly most of them are doing it surreptitiously. Western Sydney University just got caught, and that's paying students to fly to other countries, subsidising their fares, their accommodation, getting them to other countries where they can then fly into Australia from those countries where they're not embargoed by the quarantine rules. The problem being, they're jeopardising the quarantine that protects Australia from a spreading outbreak of this disease and increasing the numbers of people exposed, which increases the likelihood of fucking mutation. Now, I'm sorry about the expletive, but it drives me insane. The more people that get infected, the more chance that one human test tube becomes the modifier for something much, much worse than what it is at the moment. which is just a moderately severe flu. It's extremely contagious though already, so it has an edge already in it. It's easy, very easy to catch by comparison to other flus. One more mutation in severity, and we're looking at the worst thing that's happened this century, in the last 100 years. So we definitely need to keep the quarantine going. And these universities have been deliberately bypassing it for profit. Same as the cladding, the masters of cladding and building. Profit comes first, people's safety comes second. The economy's people. The economy's safety. The economy's health. You jeopardize the safety and health of people, and you're creating economic costs that dwarf any of the costs made by fixing the cladding in these buildings or by maintaining a sustainable and adequately long quarantine. So we're looking at some serious, egregious errors on the government's part and the private sector's part in the education sector in terms of looking at the bigger picture. And we need to do that, or we're going to suffer the consequences of failing to see that. Thanks for that. Coming back with more.